Hey, I have a second channel, Cube Comp MTDX. Hey everybody, today's a big day. We're finally building a system in the new old stock Apevia X-QPack II computer case. So I got, of course, the cover off, and as you look at the little handle it pulls out, pretty neat. Got a power supply already mounted in. We just need to go in and install our motherboard, CPU, memory, and drives and accessories, and get this thing put together. Here's a look at the back. Power supply we have here is a 300 watt unit. This is a Bestech HCX 312E that I've recapped. Going through it and recapped it. And this is actually one of the newest 312Es I've ever gotten. It actually had SATA ports already on it, but I've had to add a couple more so that way we'd have enough for everything. So let's go and have a look at what we're putting in this thing. So yeah, the tech room's it's an absolute mess right now. I literally just cleared off enough space to build this thing. But we got a Ryzen 5 5600G APU. It's a 65 watt TDP processor with Radeon graphics built in, 6 core, 12 threads. We have an ASRock A520M-HDV motherboard. So it's very similar to a whole fleet of these Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 APU systems I've upgraded in years past. Those, with the exception of one, use the A320M-HDV board. We have a PCI Express Wi-Fi adapter, because where this computer is going, it's going to need to have Wi-Fi support. We have this ByEasy USB 3.1 Type-C front panel. It provides two USB 3 Type A ports. It provides a Type-C port. It also has a built-in SD card reader, so that's perfect for my needs. Got a DVD burner, SATA DVD burner. We have a 512 gigabyte M.2 PCIe Express SSD. We have a 1 terabyte Toshiba Enterprise class hard drive. It's actually out of a Dell system. And this drive actually works really well, I'd say. So just for example, let me go ahead and pull up a speed test I did on it. So there's your specs on the hard drive on the right through Crystal Disk Info, as well as a quick bench test on the left. These numbers are definitely, I'd say, not that bad for a hard drive. So I want to say, yeah, not sure exactly how much cache this drive has. I want to say probably 32 or 64 megabytes, I've already guessed. 7200 RPM drive. So this drive here is going to be used as our data drive, and this is going to be our OS and programs. I've actually preloaded this with an existing Windows 10 install with programs and everything. Hopefully it'll actually boot up on this, otherwise I'll have to do a clean install. We've got 16 gigabytes of memory. This is actually the former memory. The memory that was out of the Mid-Tower Deluxe. When I bought all this stuff, I bought a 32 gigabyte kit and gave the Mid-Tower Deluxe 32 gigs of RAM. So we'll be putting the existing RAM from it in this system. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. First I'm going to start out by installing the motherboard and CPU and memory onto the X-QPack II's removable motherboard tray. So let's go ahead and get that taken out. So the way it looks, there's 2 screws that come out to take the tray out. It slides right out. So one thing I like already about this motherboard tray is the fact that it has a giant opening on the back to give you access to the back of your CPU cooler. That way, if your cooler requires access to the rear to remove it, you don't have to take the motherboard out just to change out a CPU cooler. Again, which I think is really nice. So, go ahead and put the rest of the system off to the side, since we'll be dealing with it later. So, we're going to get our motherboard, our CPU, our Wi-Fi adapter, RAM, if I didn't mention, SSD, and I'm also going to install an eSATA port on this thing. It goes into an expansion slot. It's best to do it now while I got the tray out. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by removing this pre-included snap-in I/O shield, which is definitely dated compared to today's standard. Let's go ahead and unbox our motherboard. So this is what you get with the A520M-HDV. You get a quick installation guide, driver CD. You also get a couple of included SATA cables, M.2 drive screw, and your I/O shield. And there is the motherboard. Go ahead and take it out. Now, of course, the box said that this motherboard is AMD Ryzen 5000 series ready. So we'll see about that. Hopefully it will start up on its own. So let's go ahead and get the new shield plate snapped in to the motherboard tray. I don't have any solder here because this is also the bench I usually work on power supplies, and sometimes there might be a trace of solder kicking around. We definitely don't want that. Now, I'm going to say this, be careful working with this, because if you flex the back of that, if you flex this too much, there's a chance it could actually break off. So keep that in mind. That is kind of a weak area on this tray, so try not to bend it back and forth too much. Alright, so now we're ready to go ahead and mount the motherboard. Tell you what, guys, it's been a minute since I built a new system from scratch. Love that new smell. Just go ahead and set this into place. And everything should line right up. Alright, so one issue I'm seeing with this case is the motherboard has its hole there, but yet the hole in the case is down a little further, so I'm gonna have to cover that up before I install this, because we don't want the motherboard to ground out against the case there. So the way I do it is use some electrical tape and cover up that one standoff. The alternative is to like brick this piece off, but I'd rather not, because who knows, in the future I might put a bigger motherboard in this tray. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and do another test fit. We'll have to start a couple of screws in this thing, because the I/O shield's trying to push it away from the edge. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is this motherboard tray actually uses the finer threaded screws versus the coarse thread. Something you kind of have to watch for. Just get a couple started in there to keep things held into place. I'm going to actually tighten that one down all the way. Okay, so the motherboard is installed to the tray. Let's go ahead and install our processor. So we need to take these off, because the stock cooler that comes with this APU does not make use of the clips. It does, however, make use of the back plate. Go ahead and unbox your processor. So there is the Ryzen 5 5600G APU, and they got a sticker there. So apparently it looks like, okay, we do get the separate graphics sticker. I did have one or two of these out of the box that were missing one of the two stickers. Alright, so go ahead and set the processor into place. And of course, there's a triangle on the corner that you'll use to line up with the socket. And be very careful, because there are, of course, itty bitty little pins on the bottom of the processor. Alright, so processor is in place. Let's have a look at the stock cooler. I will say, yeah, the stock cooler, I've never been the biggest fan of it. I'm going to go and make use of it and see how it does performance-wise. But perhaps I might swap it out for a better one. Because I do have... Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this heatsink does have a good bit of surface area, but it's just... I don't know. I mean, I've used the stock coolers in all the previous builds, the Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 APU builds, but it's just, it seems like over the years AMD has started to really skimp on the coolers. I made a video back in I think 2010 talking about this, but yeah, so we'll go in and install it, use the pre-included thermal compound. The only thing is, with the motherboard being in this tray, the back plate kind of wants to fall down a little bit. Now here's what's crazy, is you look at the back, you may be able to see how they just didn't quite get it lined up with that hole in the back. So that's kind of unfortunate, but the good news is with this style cooler, a lot of coolers out there that don't use the clips do make use of the factory backplate. Yeah, I can't say it. This cooler definitely it's definitely not very tall, which isn't such a bad thing considering that we have to have a cooler that's below this line here in order for this tray to slide back into the case. Alright. Hindsight, I should have installed the processor before I put the motherboard in this tray. Okay, having to be easy with this thing because it is pretty strong. But our cooler is now installed, and I'll go ahead and plug in our fan, which I'll have to, looks like I'm going to have to clip this out of the way. Have to zip tie it out of the way, I mean. I'll probably zip tie it to the power supply wire coming in here. There's your look. It's not very high off there. Let's go ahead and install our memory. Again, this is the existing RAM out of the Mid-Tower Deluxe. This is G-Skill Flare DDR4 2400. I would have liked to have used DDR4 3200, but did want to make use of this memory. Of course, the memory I installed in the Mid-Tower Deluxe now is definitely 3200. Okay, memory's installed. Let's go ahead and mount the M.2 SSD. Okay, the M.2 drive is now installed. Let's go ahead and install our wireless adapter. Which again, it goes into a PCIe slot. It comes with a couple of antennas, which we'll install later. They give you a little driver CD, but shouldn't be needed. It's a 802.11n dual band Wi-Fi adapter. It's good. It's good enough for the location that this computer is going to. Okay, and I have a over here. It's a eSATA port, which is mounted into a expansion slot cover. I'll go ahead and stick it on the end down here since the motherboard doesn't even come all the way down. Take this little wire tie off of here. We'll go ahead and plug this in to a SATA port. Plug into number 3, although it doesn't really matter which one you plug it into. Okay, so now our motherboard is ready to be mounted back into the system. We have the processor mounted, the memory, as well as the Wi-Fi adapter, SSD, and got our eSATA hookup on the back. So now we'll get to go ahead and drop this back in and start installing drives and accessories. Okay, let's go ahead and take out the drive cage that holds the internal 3.5-inch drives. Slides out like that. So we have to get this out to access the holes for the front drives. So since we have that out, let's go ahead and install our USB-C front panel and our DVD drive. Start out with this first. This is on the bottom. So inside here you get this little SATA power connection. What this does is they do this that way you can you basically don't lose a SATA power lead. That being said, I'll put this aside. I don't actually need that for this. So we have our internal. It's got a. It's funny. It's a USB 3 plug-in that goes into the motherboard, but it's got a USB 3 cable. With like an external cable on the end, which is kind of weird. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, so literally they have a Type A port that's kind of, well, backwards, you know. Normally you plug this into a USB port on a computer, but instead of this being a source, this is actually a recipient. It's kind of a weird setup, but the way this works is, of course, we have a single USB 3 connection here. This basically has like a built-in hub. It has two USB 3 ports in the front. It's got a regular SD, a micro SD, and a Type-C port. And for the Type-C port, it has a supplemental power connection. It simply uses a SATA power connection. So that being said, we're going to slide this in, I guess, to the front. Should be able to do it to the front. Get that lined up flush with the front of the case. Get that installed. So it looks like they did not provide screws. Alright, I got extras. These the thin ones. Okay, we can only put two in, but that will be sufficient enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug in a power supply connection and that USB cable, because it'll otherwise be pretty difficult to access once we have the top 5.25" drive in there. So it literally plugs in like plugging something into a USB port on a computer. It's really weird. It won't be the first time I've seen the Type A port get, well, I guess what I'd call misused in that manner. And I'll go ahead and plug this into the USB 3 header on the motherboard. Again, since it would otherwise be pretty difficult to access. With everything else in place. It's always fun when they give you a whole lot of cable, because then you have to figure out where to stuff it out of the way. Alright, so this cable run here is going to be for the hard drive. This cable run here will be for the front panel drives. Definitely enough there to reach the back of the 5 1/4 inch drive. Let's go ahead. Actually, I'm also going to plug in the main power connection for the motherboard, since it too will be also kind of difficult to access once the 5 1/4 inch drive is in. Alright, let's go ahead and pop this drive in. Making sure the front lines up where it needs to be. Okay, so I had to redo the connection for the power. I was able to get it to fit. So now the front USB-C ports, all that stuff's installed, and the DVD drive is installed. Still gotta hook the SATA cables up, but I'll do that shortly. Let's go ahead and put our hard drive in. I've already went ahead and bolted it into the drive cage. Get it slid back in there. Goes in just like that. Okay. So now it's a matter of putting in the rest of our cables and getting everything sorted out. So we use the included cables that came with the board. Okay, everybody, so I got all the cables put in place and tied up, and I tell you, this thing's got a bunch of cables in it for sure. Just making sure they're all seated down, because when you go to start sorting stuff out, sometimes it can pull things loose. But got our HD audio, USB 2, beeper speaker, got our LEDs and buttons up front. Got our SATA connections down there, USB 3 connection there for the port up front. Also got our temperature sensors. This thing has a temperature readout on the front for CPU and hard disk, and I have actually installed the two thermistors in their respective locations. I'm going to spin this around here. Here's a look at the front of it. I say, looks pretty cool, in my opinion. I do wish the cover was the windowed version, but like I mentioned in my last video about this case, I may actually make it windowed in the future. But for now, it's going to leave it as is. There's our hard drive there. Got everything tied up there. Not the best tie-up job, but hey, I mean, it is what it is. So, for example, there's the handle where you can carry this thing around, and I'll be honest, it's it's still kind of sketchy carrying it by that handle. I just have to be careful. I just have to be careful with it. But I'm sure you probably know what's coming up next. It's time for the very first startup of this thing. Okay, everybody, so I want to show y'all something really weird going on here. So right now the system is in soft off. It's on 5 volt standby only, not running. If you look here, we can see that everything that gets 5 volts is running, including this little meter, which for some reason is not showing the hard drive temperature. Could be a defective thermistor. I'll have to investigate that. But yeah, look at this. So you can see, of course, the thing does not start. You know what's causing this? Take a minute to guess. No, it's not the power supply's fault. I'm going to unplug this. You just heard it discharge. I'm going to disconnect this cable right here. Alright, so the cable to this BiEasy front panel header is now disconnected. Let's plug in power. And you can see nothing strange or unusual is going on anymore. System starts right up. I did actually start it off camera. Does take a minute to initialize here. Alright, so here's what's going on. And this could be, I'm not going to say it's the fault of this, but I'm going to say it could be. That's because this motherboard is feeding its USB ports off of 5 volt standby. Well, guess what else? Okay, so let me rephrase that. So when this thing is in soft off, the USB ports are being fed by plus 5 volt standby. When the system is running, it could be fed off the plus 5 volt rail. Not 100% certain on that, but anyway, when we have this auxiliary power connection plugged into the back of this device, it's actually backfeeding the plus 5 volt rail with 5 volt standby. So it looks like in order to use this, either I'm going to have to see if there's a way I can change a setting in the motherboard. Some do have this option to where the USB ports are not going to be fed off of 5 volt standby. or I'm going to try to run this without its auxiliary power connection. The reason for the auxiliary power connection to begin with is to provide extra power for the Type-C port. But other than that, we're up and running. So, first thing we'll do is go to our DRAM settings and load our XMP setting. And let's go ahead and have a look at everything else here. I'm going to probably take some time off the video to hunt for this setting for the USB. If we can have it to where the USB ports are not being powered off of the plus 5 volt standby, then we should be able to plug in this BiEasy adapter with its auxiliary connection hooked up. It's just right now that the way it currently is, the motherboard, when it's in standby state, it feeds its USB ports using the power supply's 5 volt standby rail, and that is in turn backfeeding the plus 5 volt rail through the connection on the auxiliary back into the power supply and actually powering everything with everything at 5 volts with the 5 volt standby rail. So anyways, we'll do a quick little look through the BIOS. I may have to apply a BIOS update on this. Now I have to wonder if the CMOS battery is dead, because when it started up, it did say something about a different CPU being installed and having to reset the FTPM. Now, to my understanding, this is a brand new motherboard. It's not. I don't think it's a return. They don't look like a return. But let's go into hardware monitor, and here's what I'm talking about in regards to that included CPU core. I mean, sitting here in the BIOS, the processor is running at 58.5 degrees Celsius. You know, they feel the heatsink. Heatsink does feel warm. Now, I can't really go by that as an accurate thing. But I'll have to look into that. You can see our other voltages here, and of course this power supply with its new caps, the plus 12 looks like it's doing pretty good. Some of these best tech supplies, they sometimes tend to have a low plus 12 volt rail, but it looks like otherwise it's doing pretty good. Here's your security tab. Like I say, I'm just doing a brief run through here of things. So I'm going to actually stop the video and see if I can hunt for a setting on this motherboard to perhaps not have it power the plus 5 standby. Or excuse me, power the USB ports off of plus 5 standby when it's not running. Okay, so I'm in the UEFI here in advanced ACPI configuration. I'm on the deep sleep portion. I'm going to actually right now it's actually disabled. It says configure deep sleep mode for power saving when the computer is shut down. We recommend disabling deep sleep for better system compatibility and stability, but I'm going to actually set this to enabled in S4 and S5. So I'm going to go ahead and save our changes and exit. That'll also save our XMP settings for the memory. Alright, so I'm going to shut this off once it reboots. Alright, so I'm going to plug that connection back in. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we're going to plug in power to the power supply. I'll have the camera on tripod, so bear with me. Alright, we're going to the front. We see everything comes on for a brief moment, and it goes out. So it did briefly tie in the +5 standby to everything, but then it disconnected the two. And one thing I noticed right away after I saved that setting and unplugged the power supply, it took several seconds longer for it to discharge. So definitely less load on the 5-volt standby rail. Alright, let's go and try to start it. Alright, same thing. So apparently it is an issue with this adapter, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to literally unplug this SATA power connection going to it, which is kind of a shame. I mean, the thing is, what the manufacturer of this device intended for was for that SATA power connection, the 5-volt rail, to supplement the USB power. But when your motherboard is tying is apparently tying in the USB power with 5-volt standby, that creates a bit of a conflict. So I guess what that means is we won't be able to fast charge off of that Type-C port, but I think we should still should be able to use it. So I'm going to actually have to unbolt and slide forward the optical drive so that way I can disconnect that SATA connection down there. Okay everybody, so I disconnected that SATA power connection off the back of this ByEasy Type-C USB 3 SD reader thing, and everything's working fine now, and it does seem to pick up devices. I mean, there's a USB drive, and you see it picks it right up. Here's an SD card. We'll try out the SD reader. Not sure which way it goes in. It might go in the opposite way. And you can see it's picking up the SD card just fine. Not a problem. I do wish I had like a activity indicator like the card reader on the Plexi does, for example. But I mean, it is what it is. So it looks like the only limitation we're going to have is just we can't send a whole bunch of power over the Type-C port. But I mean, we could still send over like regular USB power just fine, I would say. And one of the things I absolutely love about Windows 10 is the simple fact that you can just like you can do a clone of a install and drop it into another computer, and it will just boot right up. Usually no problem. The only thing is you generally will have to reactivate it. Now what's weird though is it actually activated just fine with a digital license using I'm guessing maybe the existing activation that was on that Dell laptop this was hooked to. Yeah, this install used to be from a Dell Inspiron, I'll say 7000 gaming series. It was a really nice laptop. One of the laptops would have it work, and I just wanted to get away from the laptop, so I decided to go with the desktop instead. And it's crazy. The crazy thing is that was a 7th gen Intel i7 laptop with NVIDIA GeForce graphics discrete GPU, completely changing platforms to AMD Ryzen, and it just, like I say, it just booted right up, no problem. And it's like, I mean, I pull up Chrome and it's literally like it picked up right where I left off. So I did change the product key to a different one that I had. Actually, I used the Windows 7 Pro key and activated it with that. So that way I know for sure that the license that's built into the computer that this came from shouldn't be affected, even though those computers, normally those laptops, they actually run Enterprise on them, which is not using the license that's tied to the motherboard on that machine. So yeah, I mean, literally I just started this thing up just minutes ago, and here it is running. our Wi-Fi adapter is working, and it's funny that it's picking up one of my SSIDs with full strength despite the antennas not even being plugged in yet. That's funny. But yeah, let me pull up Device Manager, see if there's anything that needs to be installed. It's installed the graphics and I mean all that good stuff. It's like not a problem. So yeah, guys, that's crazy. I didn't have to wait through the whole process of having to install Windows 10 and I had to go through and set up everything and all that good stuff. Now the funny thing is this computer. Now let me go into settings and go to Windows Update. Yeah, let's check hardware requirements. Let's see if it meets the Windows 11 requirements. It theoretically should. It's probably want me to download the. It probably wants me to download the PC Health Check app, but anyways, I mean, Ryzen, of course, Ryzen 5, 5600G, 16 gigs of RAM. I mean, this thing definitely should meet Microsoft's Elite Class requirements for Windows 11. So there it is, running with the cover off. I'm gonna put the cover back on here in just a little bit, and I'm gonna put this thing to work. I'm gonna I got a lot of videos, or at least weather case videos on Cube Comp MDDX I need to time lapse, and it's something I've been having to Plexi and Metal Lux do, but I can actually have a third computer sign on and do it. Test out the 5600G there, see how well it does for that. So yeah, guys, now with this indicator here, I'm going to say either it's a bad solder joint. I may have to investigate that later on. I mean, it could be a bad solder joint, or the thermistor itself could be bad. I don't know. So that's kind of a bummer. Here's our DVD drive. So yeah, guys, I'm definitely happy to see this thing running, and of course it's running really quiet. You're actually hearing the Plexi in the background running. It's a little louder, but okay. So I got that thing there shut off. Now you can actually have a listen to this thing. How quiet it runs. I'd say it's pretty quiet. It's actually a tad quieter than the Metal Lux running. Now the CPU fan, I got the fan curve set to the standard mode. It was set on silent originally, and that was causing the CPU temp to climb, so I turned it to standard and that's cooled it down a bit. Like I have mentioned in this video, not a big fan of that stock cooler. Though I can say in Windows it does run a lot cooler. So also the rear fan and an intake fan on the front, they both are powered off of 12 volts, but they run at a nice low speed. They're not like wide open. So now you can just have listen at the back here. Definitely runs quiet. Running nice and quiet. Nice little breeze of air coming off the 120mm fan, as well as the power supply fan. Power supply air is barely even warm. So some of y'all who may be freaking out because I'm running this brand new $500 hardware with this old former E-machine power supply, it's not even, I mean, the power supply itself, it's not even loading it down hard at all. Now of course if I start doing some serious editing, yeah, we'll put some load on it, but I've built a whole handful of these Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 APU systems using OEM supplies, because a lot of these, a lot of the builds I did were really just upgrades. Existing computers, I just did drop-in upgrades. These supplies, now there is one that is known to be a motherboard killer. That's the Bestech HCX25012E. It has a defective 2-transistor 5-volt standby circuit, but the 312E as well as the 25012Z and 312Z, they're actually really solid units, minus some capacitor issues. And as I mentioned, I've just recapped this one with Japanese capacitors, Rubicons, and like I say, I think it should run pretty good for a while. This is not the one I recently had to take the conductive glue out of. That was actually a different one. This one's actually newer, and it doesn't have that yellow glue in it. But so yeah, guys, super excited to have this thing running finally. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Well, everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Cube Computer channel, and be sure to tick that bell so you'll get notified when new videos are posted. Also, don't forget, I have a whole lot of other interesting videos here on the channel to check out. And also, in addition, I have a second channel, Cube Comp MTDX, where I have all sorts of other videos not exactly related to technology. Links to the channels are available at the end of this video. Again, I thank you for your support, and thanks for watching this video.